The final battle for the galaxy began at the Nexus Gateway, the most important hyperspace junction in known space. Commander Steve Campbell led the advanced human fleet toward the massive swarm force that had gathered there, like a dark cloud consuming starlight. The creatures had learned everything they thought they needed to know about human tactics from their previous encounters, but they were about to discover that humans had been teaching them lies. Admiral Rodriguez coordinated the attack from his command ship, while Dr. Helen Ross monitored the quantum disruption weapons that would determine the battle's outcome. The human fleet approached in formations that seemed familiar to the swarm, based on their captured intelligence, but these formations were actually designed to maximize the effectiveness of weapons the creatures had never seen before. "Remember, we get one chance at this," Rodriguez told his fleet commanders during the final briefing. "Once we activate the quantum disruptors, the swarm will lose their collective intelligence, but they'll also realize what we've done. We need to destroy their command structure before they can adapt to fighting as individuals." Captain Grace Miller brought the Liberty into weapons range of the largest swarm construct, a creature the size of a moon that served as the central coordination node for millions of smaller units. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Cooper, targeted the quantum disruption weapons, while her weapons officer, Commander Paul Jenkins, prepared the conventional armaments that would finish what the disruptors started. The battle began exactly as the swarm expected based on their accumulated knowledge of human tactics. The human ships formed predictable attack formations and fired weapons in coordinated patterns that the creatures had learned to counter. For the first few minutes, it seemed like another easy victory for the adaptive parasites as they began overwhelming human defenses. Then Amy Chen's quantum disruption weapons activated simultaneously across the entire human fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Millions of swarm creatures suddenly found themselves cut off from the collective intelligence that had made them invincible. Individual units that had been part of a galaxy-spanning network became isolated animals with no access to shared knowledge. Lieutenant Ashley Kane led her fighter squadron against swarm units that had been terrifying opponents moments before, but were now confused and helpless. "They don't know how to fight alone," she reported as her pilots destroyed creature after creature with basic weapons that should have been useless against such advanced enemies. The quantum disruptors created chaos throughout the swarm force as creatures lost their ability to coordinate attacks or share defensive information. Units that had been working together perfectly became isolated individuals that could not even communicate with their neighbors. The galaxy's most dangerous enemy suddenly became vulnerable to tactics that would have worked against any ordinary predator. But the battle was far from over. The swarm command structure began adapting to the new situation by establishing localized control networks that were resistant to quantum disruption. The creatures might have lost their galaxy-wide intelligence, but they still possessed incredible, individual capabilities and the ability to learn quickly from direct experience. Captain Steve Williams commanded the destroyer Vigilant as it engaged a group of swarm creatures that had formed a new coordination network around a larger command unit. His crew discovered that while the quantum disruptors prevented long-range communication, they could not stop creatures in close proximity from sharing information through other methods. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Steve reported to Admiral Rodriguez. "The local networks are smaller, but they're still dangerous. We need to destroy the command units before they can establish stable control over their forces." Meanwhile, desperate Federation leaders who had been fighting a losing war for months suddenly received reports of impossible human victories. High Arbiter Zexthul, his crystal body now heavily scarred from swarm attacks, could barely believe the intelligence reports reaching his mobile command center. "The humans are winning," his aide reported with amazement. "They're destroying swarm forces that defeated our best fleets. They have weapons and tactics that we've never seen before." Zexthul stared at the tactical displays showing human ships systematically dismantling the enemy that had seemed unstoppable. For the first time in 50 years, the High Arbiter remembered the young species his people had dismissed as primitive and harmless. The humans had been given 12 worthless worlds and told to stay out of galactic affairs. Now they were saving the galaxy with capabilities that surpassed anything the Federation had achieved in millennia of technological development. "Contact the human fleet," Zexthul ordered with humility that his species had not shown in centuries. Offer them whatever assistance we can provide. Ask them what they need from us. His communications officer, a young Zephyrian named Veltar, transmitted the message with hands that shook from excitement rather than fear for the first time in months. Admiral Rodriguez received the Federation request for cooperation while coordinating the final phase of the battle at Nexus Gateway. The irony was not lost on him that the same aliens who had treated humanity like children were now begging for help from the species they had forgotten entirely. "Tell them we accept their assistance," Rodriguez replied after consulting with his staff. "But make it clear that this alliance will be based on equality, rather than the condescending terms they offered us 50 years ago. The galaxy has changed, and so have the rules." Dr. Lisa Grant, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, watched the battle reports from her retirement home on New Earth. She had spent her career hoping for genuine cooperation between humans and aliens, but she had never imagined it would come about through circumstances like these. The young woman who had once tried to impress alien scientists with human achievements was now seeing those achievements save entire civilizations. The final assault on the swarm command structure required coordination between human quantum disruption, technology, and Federation energy weapons. Captain Miller's Liberty led a combined fleet of human and alien ships against the moon-sized creature that controlled the remaining swarm forces. The quantum disruptors isolated the command unit while Zephyrian energy beams and Corvani matter manipulators destroyed its physical structure. Lieutenant Commander Peter Hayes watched his sensors as the massive creature died, and its death signals spread throughout the remaining swarm forces. Without central coordination, the individual creatures began fighting each other for resources rather than cooperating against their enemies. The galaxy-threatening invasion became a cleanup operation, as scattered swarm units were hunted down by combined human-alien task forces. When the battle ended, Admiral Rodriguez found himself in the strange position of negotiating with the same High Arbiter who had dismissed humanity 50 years earlier. But now Jake Morrison, the former commander who had been condescended to by the original Federation Council, sat across from Zexthal as an equal partner in establishing a new galactic order. "We propose a new alliance based on mutual respect and shared knowledge," Jake said during the first post-war conference. "Each species contributes their unique strengths while learning from others. No more dismissing civilizations because they seem young or primitive." The new Galactic Accord established humanity as the dominant military and technological power while recognizing the valuable contributions of other species. Zephyrian energy manipulation techniques enhanced human weapon systems. Nexari collective processing power improved human computer networks. Corvani manufacturing methods increased human industrial capacity. But now these exchanges happen between equals rather than superiors and inferiors. Dr. Amy Chen received recognition as the scientist whose quantum disruption technology had saved the galaxy. Her research into adaptive materials and energy manipulation became the foundation for a new generation of defensive systems that could protect against any future swarm-like threats. More importantly, her work demonstrated the value of approaching old problems with fresh perspectives. The galaxy had learned a harsh lesson about the dangers of arrogance and complacency. The Federation's dismissal of humanity had nearly cost them everything when they needed allies who could think differently than they did. The same young species they had considered harmless had possessed exactly the qualities needed to defeat an enemy that traditional military thinking could not overcome. As human ships patrolled the former swarm territories and helped rebuild destroyed worlds, Admiral Rodriguez reflected on the ironic justice of their situation. The galaxy had forgotten humans and paid dearly for that mistake. Now humanity's patience and preparation had earned them a place as the galaxy's guardians and protectors. The Federation had ruled through superior technology and ancient wisdom, but they had lost their empire to an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. Humanity had triumphed through creativity, determination, and the willingness to break rules that everyone else considered sacred. The galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating humans again. The Void Swarm struck without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning when most of the galaxy was conducting routine business. Admiral Elena Foster watched the emergency broadcast from her command ship at the edge of human space as the first reports came in from the Zephyrian core worlds. The crystalline cities that had stood for millennia were being consumed by creatures that looked like living metal spiders the size of skyscrapers. The Federation's response was immediate but inadequate. Zephyrian defense fleets moved into standard battle formations with their crystal ships arranged in geometric patterns that had proven effective for centuries. Their energy weapons fired concentrated beams that could melt asteroids, but the swarm, creatures absorbed the energy and seemed to grow larger. Within hours, the first Zephyrian fleet was completely destroyed. Captain Danny Lewis piloted the scout ship New Horizon through the debris field where a Federation battle group had made its final stand. His sensors recorded everything while his ship remained hidden using human stealth technology that the aliens had never imagined. The swarm creatures moved through space like a living tide, consuming wreckage and growing stronger with each destroyed ship. "They're learning from every attack," Danny reported to Admiral Foster through their quantum communication network. The second wave of Zephyrian ships used different energy frequencies, but the swarm had already adapted. The creatures developed new defenses faster than the Federation could change tactics. Elena studied the tactical displays showing swarm movements across multiple star systems. The creatures spread like a virus, consuming everything in their path while sending information back to the main force. Each encounter taught them something new about Federation technology and tactics. The aliens' rigid thinking made them predictable opponents for an enemy that learned and evolved constantly. The Nexari tried next, sending their hive fleets in coordinated attacks that had overwhelmed countless enemies over the centuries. Their collective consciousness allowed perfect coordination between thousands of ships acting as a single entity. But the swarm found ways to disrupt their mental connections, turning the Nexari's greatest strength into a critical weakness. Dr. Lisa Grant, now elderly but still sharp, watched the battle reports from her research facility on New Earth. She had spent 50 years studying alien psychology, and she understood what was happening. "The Federation species are too specialized," she explained to her assistant, Dr. Robert Kim. "The Zephyrians only know energy manipulation. The Nexari only know collective thinking. The Corvani only know technological solutions. But the swarm learns from all of them." The Corvani launched their own counterattack using weapons that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Their ships were masterpieces of engineering with shields that could deflect almost any known attack. For a brief moment, it seemed like their advanced technology might stop the swarm advance. Then the creatures learned to absorb and redirect, the Corvani weapons turning their own power against them. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the monitoring station Deep Watch 3, where human observers tracked the collapse of Federation defenses. Her crew included specialists who had studied alien military doctrine for decades. They watched in amazement as the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy fell one by one to an enemy they could not understand. "The Federation keeps trying the same approaches," Sarah told her intelligence officer, Lieutenant Marcus Brown. "They form battle lines, use maximum firepower, and expect their superior technology to win. But the swarm doesn't follow those rules. It adapts and evolves faster than they can respond." The swarm's advance seemed unstoppable as it consumed world after world. Ancient Zephyrian crystal gardens that had grown for thousands of years were devoured in hours. Nexari hive worlds with billions of connected minds fell silent as the creatures severed their mental links. Corvani manufacturing centers that had produced advanced technology for centuries were stripped bare and converted into swarm breeding grounds. Refugee ships fled toward the galactic rim carrying survivors from dozens of species. They brought stories of impossible creatures that could mimic any technology and adapt to any defense. The Federation Council, what remained of it, sent desperate messages to every known civilization begging for assistance. But most species were either already destroyed or too frightened to risk their own forces. High Arbiter Zexthul, his crystal body now cracked with stress fractures, issued emergency decrees from the Mobile Federation headquarters. His surviving counselors included Nexari representatives whose hive connections had been permanently severed, and Corvani officers whose advanced armor could no longer protect them from an enemy that had learned to turn their own weapons against them. "We need new strategies," Zexthul declared during an emergency session. "Our traditional methods are failing. We must find allies who think differently than we do." But when his staff searched their databases for potential allies, they found nothing useful. Every major species had already been contacted, and most were either destroyed or in full retreat. The irony was that the answer existed in their own records, but they had forgotten it completely. 50 years earlier, they had dismissed a young species called humans and assigned them to an insignificant sector of space. That species had been erased from current Federation databases because they were considered too primitive to matter in galactic affairs. Lieutenant Commander Janet Hayes monitored Federation communications from her intelligence post on the human world of Liberty. She listened to increasingly desperate broadcasts as the alien civilizations realized their situation was hopeless. Their military forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that learned from every encounter while they remained locked in thinking patterns that were thousands of years old. They're asking for help from species they've never heard of, Janet reported to her superior, Colonel Steve Campbell. They're trying to contact extinct civilizations. They're even considering awakening ancient AI systems that were shut down for being too dangerous. But they still haven't remembered that humans exist. The Federation's oversight created a perfect opportunity for humanity. While the galaxy's attention focused entirely on the swarm threat, human observers gathered detailed intelligence about both sides of the conflict. They learned the swarm's capabilities and limitations while also identifying the critical flaws in Federation strategy. Dr. Amy Chen's research team had been developing quantum disruption weapons specifically designed to counter the swarm's communication networks. Her prototype devices could potentially sever the connections that allowed the creatures to share information and coordinate their attacks. If the swarm could not learn from each encounter, their adaptation advantage would disappear. Admiral Tony Rodriguez prepared the Colonial Defense Fleet for combat operations that would either save the galaxy or destroy humanity. His ships carried weapons and defensive systems that no other species had imagined. Human tactics emphasized unpredictability and creative thinking over rigid doctrine. Most importantly, humans understood something the Federation had forgotten. Winning a war required accepting that the enemy would adapt and preparing multiple backup plans. The Void Swarm continued its advance toward the galactic core, consuming everything in its path while growing stronger and smarter with each victory. The Federation's greatest civilizations lay in ruins, their military forces scattered or destroyed. Billions of refugees fled toward the rim of the galaxy, many heading unknowingly toward the forgotten human sector. Elena Foster stood on her command bridge watching the tactical displays that showed swarm forces approaching human space. In a few days, the creatures would encounter something they had never faced before. An enemy that was younger and less experienced than the Federation, but infinitely more adaptable. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an enemy that refused to follow the rules. The first swarm scouts entered human space on a Thursday morning and immediately encountered something they had never faced before: organized resistance that made no sense according to their accumulated data. Captain Grace Miller commanded the Azure, flagship Liberty, as it led a human battle group in an attack pattern that seemed chaotic, but was actually carefully coordinated. Her ships moved in unpredictable formations that confused the swarm creatures who had learned to anticipate Federation tactics. Lieutenant Commander Peter Hayes monitored the swarm's behavior from his analysis station aboard the cruiser Freedom. His job was to watch how the creatures adapted to human tactics and report any changes to Admiral Rodriguez, who commanded the overall defense. What he observed amazed him. "They're trying to learn our patterns, but we keep changing the rules," he reported. "Every time they adapt to one tactic, we switch to something completely different." The swarm had overwhelmed the Federation by learning from each encounter and developing counters to alien strategies. But human strategies were based on creative improvisation rather than rigid doctrine. Lieutenant Ashley Kane demonstrated this perfectly as she led her fighter squadron in an attack run that combined barrel rolls with sudden direction changes and weapons fire that alternated between different energy types randomly. "They can't predict what we're going to do because we don't know what we're going to do until we do it," Ashley explained to her wingman during a brief break between combat missions. Her fighter squadron had destroyed 3 swarm creatures using tactics that no military academy would ever teach, because they seemed too chaotic to work effectively. Dr. Amy Chen watched the battle reports from her laboratory on Terra Nova while her team put finishing touches on their quantum disruption weapons. The early engagements proved that human unpredictability gave them an advantage against the swarm, but it would not be enough to win the war. They needed weapons that could exploit the creature's fundamental weaknesses. The swarm shares information through quantum entanglement networks, Amy explained to her research partner, Dr. Helen Ross. Every creature is connected to every other creature instantaneously across vast distances. That's how they learn so quickly. But it's also their greatest vulnerability because if we can disrupt those connections, they become just individual animals instead of a collective intelligence. Sergeant Frank Moore worked with Amy's team to weaponize their quantum disruption technology. His military engineering background helped them create devices that could be deployed on the battlefield rather than just tested in laboratories. The prototype weapons looked simple, but they could potentially change the entire war by severing the swarm's ability to share information. Meanwhile, Admiral Rodriguez coordinated the human defense from his command center on New Boston. His tactical displays showed swarm forces spreading throughout human space, but meeting resistance at every turn. Unlike the Federation forces that had been overwhelmed quickly, human ships fought running battles that prevented the creatures from establishing permanent footholds. "We're not trying to stop them," Rodriguez explained to his staff during a strategy meeting. "We're trying to teach them wrong lessons. Every time they encounter our forces, we show them tactics that seem effective, but are actually designed to make them overconfident. When they try to use what they've learned against our main force, they'll be in for a surprise." The human strategy relied on deception and misdirection rather than direct confrontation. Small groups of ships would engage swarm forces using apparently inferior tactics that allowed the creatures to win minor victories. These encounters taught the swarm to expect human weakness and predictability that did not actually exist in the main fleet. Captain Linda Foster commanded one of the deception units aboard the destroyer Courage. Her orders were to fight the swarm using obsolete Federation tactics and allow her ship to be destroyed in a way that would make the creatures overconfident. It was a dangerous mission that required incredible courage from her entire crew. "Remember, we want them to think they understand us," Linda told her bridge crew as swarm forces approached their position. "Fight like a Federation ship would fight. Use predictable formations and conventional weapons. Make them believe that humans are just another rigid species that can't adapt quickly." The Courage and 5 other human ships engaged a swarm scouting force using textbook Federation tactics. They formed a standard battle line and fired concentrated energy weapons in coordinated volleys. The swarm creatures adapted to these attacks quickly and destroyed the human force within an hour, but the destroyed ships transmitted detailed information about swarm capabilities to the hidden human fleet. Refugee ships from dozens of species continued fleeing toward the galactic rim, many arriving in human space without realizing they had entered territory controlled by the species the Federation had forgotten. These refugees brought first-hand accounts of swarm tactics and capabilities that supplemented human intelligence gathering. Commander David Clark interviewed refugees at the processing station on Liberty Station. An elderly Zephyrian merchant named Kethavar described watching his homeworld consumed by creatures that learned to shatter crystal structures by analyzing their molecular composition. "They study everything," Kethavar explained through a translation device. "Every defense we created, they found a way to overcome it faster than we could implement it." A Nexari survivor told similar stories about how the swarm learned to disrupt hive mind connections and turn the collective consciousness against itself. A Corvani engineer described watching advanced technology being absorbed and improved by creatures that understood scientific principles better than their creators. These refugee accounts confirmed what human observers had already discovered. The swarm's greatest strength was its ability to learn and adapt rapidly to any challenge. But they also revealed something important that the Federation had missed. The creatures relied completely on their quantum communication network to share information. Individual swarm units were actually quite vulnerable when isolated from the collective intelligence. Dr. Ben Clark's quantum communication network proved invaluable during this phase of the war. Human commanders could coordinate their forces instantly across multiple star systems while maintaining complete communication security. The swarm could intercept Federation transmissions, but human quantum channels remained completely invisible to their sensors. The decisive moment came when Amy Chen's team successfully tested their quantum disruption weapons on captured swarm specimens. The devices severed the creature's connection to the collective intelligence and rendered them helpless. Individual swarm units without access to shared knowledge behaved like confused animals rather than adaptive parasites. "It works," Amy reported to Admiral Rodriguez during an encrypted communication. "The quantum disruptors can isolate individual creatures from the network. Once they're cut off, they lose access to everything the swarm has learned. They become vulnerable to even basic weapons." Rodriguez immediately ordered the production of quantum disruption weapons for the entire colonial defense fleet. Human industrial facilities worked around the clock to manufacture devices that could potentially turn the tide of the Galactic War. Within weeks, every human ship carried weapons that no other species had imagined. Meanwhile, the main swarm force approached the human core worlds expecting to encounter another rigid species that would fall quickly to their adaptive tactics. They had learned from their encounters with human deception units and believed they understood human capabilities. The creatures moved confidently toward what they expected would be another easy victory. But Admiral Rodriguez had prepared a surprise that would shock the galaxy. The human main fleet waited in orbit around New Earth with weapons and tactics that the swarm had never encountered. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but the ability to think creatively under pressure. The stage was set for a battle that would determine whether the galaxy survived or fell to the void swarm. The creatures had consumed the greatest civilizations in galactic history, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules of warfare. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as the massive alien space station came into view. The structure was bigger than any city on Earth, and it sparkled with lights that seemed to dance across its surface. He had trained for this moment his entire life, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of the Galactic Federation headquarters. Dr. Lisa Grant moved to stand beside him, her tablet ready to record everything they would see. Behind them, Colonel Ryan. Burke checked his weapon one more time, even though they were here for peace talks. The radio crackled with an alien voice speaking perfect English. "Human vessel, you are cleared to dock at Port 7. Follow the blue lights, do not deviate from the path." Jake nodded to his pilot, who guided their ship toward the docking bay. The Defiance was Earth's finest ship, but it looked tiny next to the alien vessels they passed. Some ships were made of what looked like living crystal, while others seemed to be built from metal that shifted and moved like liquid. When they stepped off their ship, 3 aliens waited for them. The first was tall and thin with skin that looked like blue glass. This was Zexthul, a Zephyrian and the High Arbiter of the Federation Council. The second alien looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and silver eyes that never blinked. This was a Nexari, part of their hive mind species. The third alien wore a suit of advanced armor that hummed with energy. This was Corvani, from a species known for their technology. Zexthul spoke first, his voice sounding like wind through crystals. "Welcome, humans. We have heard much about your species. You have only recently discovered faster than light travel, is this correct?" Jake nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, we achieved FTL travel about 20 years ago. We come seeking friendship and trade with your Federation." The Nexari clicked its mandibles in what might have been laughter. 20 years. We have been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. Your species is very young. The Corvani's armor translated his thoughts into words. "Young and primitive. We have observed your world. You still fight wars with explosive weapons and metal vehicles." Dr. Grant stepped forward with her tablet. "We may be young, but we have made great advances in many fields. Our medical technology has eliminated most diseases. Our computer systems can process information at incredible speeds. We have theories about quantum mechanics that might interest your scientists." She held out her tablet showing human achievements. Zexthul, barely, glanced at the device. Interesting, but not impressive. The Corvani cured all diseases 500 years ago. The Nexari process information through their collective mind faster than any computer. Your quantum theories are basic compared to our mastery of reality manipulation. Colonel Burke felt his jaw tighten, but he kept quiet. These aliens were dismissing everything humanity had accomplished. Jake tried a different approach. Perhaps we can offer military assistance. Humans have proven to be skilled warriors and tacticians. We have survived countless conflicts on our world. The three aliens looked at each other, and the Nexari made that clicking sound again. The Corvani's armor hummed louder. Military assistance. From a species that has never left their solar system until recently. We have the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Our ships can destroy planets. Our shields can stop any attack. What could you possibly offer us? Zexthul raised one crystalline hand. However, the Federation believes in giving all species a chance to prove themselves. We will grant humanity membership in our organization. You will be given a small sector of space containing 12 worlds. These worlds are suitable for your kind, but they are not valuable to us. You may settle them and attempt to build a civilization. Lisa looked at her tablet again. What about trade agreements, technology sharing, cultural exchange programs? The High Arbiter's crystal skin seemed to dim slightly. Trade will be limited. Your technology is too primitive to be useful to us. You may purchase basic items from Federation merchants, but you have little to offer in return. As for cultural exchange, we will send observers to study your development, but we do not expect to learn much. Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. What are the terms of our membership? What rights do we have? What responsibilities? Zexthul waved a hand and a holographic document appeared in the air. Simple terms. You will not interfere with Federation affairs. You will not travel outside your assigned sector without permission. You will report your progress to us every 10 years. In return, we will protect you from external threats and allow you to exist. Ryan Burke finally spoke up. And if we refuse these terms? The Corvani's armor made a sound like static. Then you remain isolated in your single solar system until you develop enough to earn better terms. This could take centuries or millennia. The three humans looked at each other. They had come hoping for partnership, but instead found condescension. These aliens saw humanity as children playing with toys. Jake realized they had no choice but to accept. Earth needed access to the galaxy even under these harsh terms. We accept, Jake said quietly. Zexthul nodded as if this had never been in doubt. Excellent. Your sector designation is Rim 7. The coordinates will be transmitted to your ship. We suggest you begin colonization efforts immediately. The worlds there will require significant work to become truly habitable. As they walked back to their ship, Lisa whispered to Jake. They barely looked at our technology. They dismissed everything without even examining it. Ryan added, They think we're harmless. They think we're too weak to matter. Jake watched the alien ships moving through space around them. Each one was larger and more advanced than anything humans had built. But as he thought about the meeting, he realized something important. These aliens were arrogant. They were so confident in their superiority that they had stopped paying attention to potential threats. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they could not imagine anyone challenging them. When the Defiance left the station and headed toward their new sector, Jake made a decision. Humanity would take these 12 worlds and build something amazing. They would prove that being young did not mean being weak. The Federation had given them time and space to grow. They would use both wisely. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as primitive and harmless. Jake Morrison smiled grimly as the stars streaked past. They would regret that mistake. 50 years had passed since the first human ships arrived in the Rim 7 sector, and the galaxy had moved on to other concerns. The Federation faced new threats that demanded their attention, while humanity worked quietly in their corner of space. Dr. Amy Chen stood in her laboratory on Terra Nova, watching the sunrise through the reinforced windows. She had been born here 28 years ago when this world was still mostly empty rock and thin air. Now it bloomed with earth plants and bustled with 3 million colonists. Amy's father had been one of the original administrators who helped transform these worlds. He often told stories about the early days when every breath of air had to be manufactured, and every drop of water carefully recycled. Those hard times had taught humanity valuable lessons about making the most of limited resources. The Federation had given them 12 marginal worlds, and humans had turned them into paradise. In her lab, Amy worked alongside engineer Paul Stevens and physicist Dr. Karen White on projects that would have amazed the aliens who had dismissed them decades ago. Paul held up a piece of metal that shifted colors as he moved it. The adaptive armor plating is responding perfectly to energy fluctuations. It can absorb and redistribute force better than anything in our database. Karen looked up from her quantum computer terminal. The processing speeds are incredible. We're running calculations that would take Federation computers days to complete, and we're finishing them in hours. Amy smiled as she watched the data flow across multiple screens. Human technology had advanced in ways the Federation never expected, because humans approached problems differently than other species. While the aliens focused on perfecting existing technologies, humans constantly invented new approaches. They combined ideas from different fields and created solutions that seemed impossible to more traditional minds. The Federation's knowledge was vast, but it was also rigid. Human knowledge was smaller, but infinitely more flexible. Admiral Tony Rodriguez reviewed fleet reports from his command center on New Boston. The Colonial Defense Fleet had grown from 12 salvaged alien ships to over 300 vessels of human design. Each ship incorporated recovered Federation technology, but improved upon it using human engineering principles. His aide, Captain Linda Hayes, brought him the latest intelligence reports. "The pirates are getting bolder," Linda reported. "They hit another Corvani trade convoy last week. The Federation response was slow and ineffective." Tony nodded as he studied the tactical display. Federation military doctrine had not changed in centuries. They relied on overwhelming firepower and rigid formations that worked well against traditional enemies, but struggled against unpredictable raiders. Meanwhile, human ships used tactics learned from Earth's naval history, combined with three-dimensional space combat principles. Human captains trained to think creatively and adapt quickly to changing situations. Every human ship captain studied the great military leaders of Earth history, from Alexander to Napoleon to Patton. They learned that winning battles required more than superior weapons. Dr. Ben Clark made the breakthrough that changed everything. Working in a secret research station hidden in an asteroid field, he successfully reverse-engineered a Federation quantum communicator and found ways to improve its design. His team discovered that alien technology was actually less advanced in some areas, because the different species could not share information effectively. The Zephyrians excelled at energy manipulation but struggled with computer systems. The Nexari had incredible processing power but lacked individual creativity. The Corvani built amazing devices but could not adapt them quickly to new situations. Each species had strengths but also significant blind spots that they covered by trading with others. Humans had studied all three species carefully during the past 50 years. They learned the Zephyrian energy techniques and applied human computer science to create better results. They borrowed Nexari collective processing concepts, but maintained human individual initiative. They took Corvani manufacturing methods and improved them with human innovation. Ben's quantum communication network allowed instant contact between all human colonies without using Federation channels. This meant humans could coordinate their activities across multiple star systems without alien oversight. More importantly, it meant they could gather intelligence about galactic affairs while remaining invisible to Federation sensors. The information they collected painted a troubling picture. The Federation was struggling with problems they refused to acknowledge. The Void Swarm had been detected at the galaxy's edge, and early encounters suggested these creatures were unlike anything the Federation had faced before. Reports described silicon-based parasites that consumed both organic matter and technology, while adapting rapidly to any defense. Captain Helen Ross commanded the Deep Space Monitoring Station, Watchpost 7, where human sensors tracked movements throughout the galaxy. Her crew included some of the best intelligence analysts humanity had produced. They noticed patterns that Federation observers missed because humans looked for different things. "The swarm is learning," Helen told her senior analyst, Lieutenant Commander Mark Johnson. Each attack is more sophisticated than the last. They're not just consuming ships and planets. They're studying Federation tactics and finding weaknesses. Mark pulled up tactical displays from the latest battles. The Federation keeps using the same responses. They form defensive lines and try to overwhelm the enemy with firepower, but the swarm adapts to each attack and comes back stronger. Human. Observers watched as Zephyrian crystal ships shattered under weapons that learned to vibrate at precisely the right frequency to break their hulls. They saw Nexari hive fleets lose coordination when the swarm found ways to disrupt their collective consciousness. Corvani technology failed when the parasites learned to absorb and redirect energy attacks. The Federation sent requests for aid to every known species in the galaxy, but they had forgotten about humanity entirely. 50 years of dismissal had erased humans from their databases and their memories. Official Federation maps no longer marked human territory because it was considered too insignificant to matter. This oversight gave humanity a crucial advantage. While the galaxy focused on the growing swarm threat, humans continued developing new technologies and tactics in secret. Dr. Amy Chen's team perfected adaptive materials that could change properties instantly. Admiral Rodriguez's fleet practiced unconventional combat maneuvers that would confuse any enemy expecting traditional responses. Dr. Ben Clark expanded the communication network to include monitoring stations throughout human space and beyond. These hidden sensors watched every major battle and recorded detailed information about both Federation failures and swarm capabilities. Humans learned from every encounter while remaining completely undetected. The Federation's arrogance had created a blind spot that humanity exploited perfectly. The aliens were so convinced of their own superiority that they never considered the possibility that the primitive humans might have developed into something dangerous. They had forgotten that young species often grow faster than old ones because they have fewer preconceptions to overcome. As the Void Swarm advanced deeper into Federation territory, destroying entire worlds and consuming billion-year-old civilizations, the galaxy's attention focused entirely on this existential threat. Ancient species with vast knowledge and powerful technology fell one by one to an enemy that learned and adapted faster than they could respond. But in the forgotten corner of space known as Rim 7, humanity prepared for war with weapons and tactics that no one else in the galaxy had imagined. The Federation had dismissed them as too young and weak to matter. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. Amy Chen looked up at the stars from her laboratory window and smiled. Tomorrow she would test the prototype quantum disruptor that could potentially sever swarm communication networks. Humanity's time of hiding was almost over.